So apparently somebody made two comments on one of my videos and stated, actually my video about that annoying pest Tucker Carlson, and he stated that the news is socially liberal and fiscally conservative. I don't know how many times I have to point this out. There's no such thing as fiscal conservatism. Okay? There could be fiscal nationalism, which would be the reverse of what people think fiscal conservatism is. What we call fiscal conservatism in the United States is economic liberalism. And that is a free market-based system that promotes, and I do agree with private ownership of most things like personal property, land, things of that nature. However, I don't necessarily agree with that in regards to the means of production and things of that nature. Although, and I'll get into that in other videos with how you need a mixed system. I do think things like 3D printing and the democratization of production, or I shouldn't say democratization because I don't believe in, I think that's a stupid word. The decentralization of production of consumer goods through access to things like 3D printing and just increased knowledge in material sciences. And even with biotech and things like that, like there's a company called the Odin where you can learn all about different biotechnologies and stuff like that. I think that's going to really increase the fair market, like it'll increase consumer goods, the increased luxury consumer goods, and it will be a good thing, but I don't think that necessities should be left up to the whims of the market. Now, classical liberalism is what modern conservatives in the United States are. Libertarians are the most, libertarians are the closest to a true classical liberal as you can get. But many conservatives have started to embrace this stupidity that is classical liberalism. Now, I agree with classical liberalism in a lot of ways. I'm a big fan of Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher. I think that Thomas Hobbes and I agree with the reasons why the state, which basically what the state is that the people get together and they form the state to agree with the unified protection, like it says in our Constitution, life, liberty, and well, it's actually our Declaration of Independence, I believe. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to protect our posterity. I'm sorry. So the thing is, I believe that the state is formed always by the people. However, the state sometimes runs away with, like how they say the dish ran away with the spoon. Sometimes the state runs away with the power. And that's what you see happening more often than not. But I think Thomas Hobbes gives justification like Benito Mussolini did in where do our rights come from? They don't come from God. They don't come from nature. They're not magical, interdimensional things or metaphysical things per se. Well, technically they're metaphysical. But my point is they come from the state. They come from the state in as much as the state agrees to grant and defend the individual's rights. So long as the state is a reflection of the people, you will have those rights. When the state becomes an oligarchy, okay, when the state becomes a totalitarian dictatorship, when the state becomes an authoritarian power that does not need to grant you rights, you cease to have those rights. And we see that happening in the United States now. We see our rights diminishing every day, especially regarding the current situation we're in. pretty soon, like what's funny is we won't really have a right to choose what to do with our bodies or what we put into our bodies, I fear. In England, they adjusted the mental health laws to allow for the forced administration of medications to people that are not necessarily crazy, but because they doctored the mental health laws. And this goes back to when I was working in mental health. While I was working in mental health is disgustingly filled with liberals. I mean, it's sickening how many liberals are in mental health. Now, one of my things was I brought up how what started to happen in mental health is if you disagree with homosexuality, you're considered homophobic and you're lambasted, and they try and find ways to consider you mentally ill. And what I pointed out is it starts with people that have a disagreement with homosexuality, which this is the thing what you have to understand with me. I have a personal moral disagreement with homosexuality. That does not mean I believe that it is my right or the state's right to tell people that they can or cannot be homosexual. I believe that is a personal choice. It's up to the individual. It's not up to me to tell people how to live their lives. Now, however, with the mental health community, they seem to think that it is their right to tell people how to live their life and what their morality should be, and that they believe that everybody should be forced to accept homosexuality as the norm, okay? I don't think that's fair, okay? I don't think it's the mental health community or mental health industry's job to dictate to me or you whether or not we should accept homosexuality or disagree with homosexuality. That's not up to mental health clinicians to police thoughts like that. It's not a psychosis to disagree with somebody on a moral level, especially when you have to consider homosexuals are in the minority to begin with. If anybody would be not in sync with the majority, it would be the homosexuals themselves that view homosexuality as the norm, because clearly it is not the norm based on the numbers. But more importantly, what you have to understand, what I would bring up in these county meetings when these people would be talking about this, it starts with policing of what they consider to be homophobia. Where does it end? And I brought up about global warming denial. Are we going to start locking people up for disbelief of global warming? And then one of the radical commie leftists said, well, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is it's not the mental health community's job to police personal opinion. Okay? That's what's wrong with that. The other thing is global warming. Everybody says the science is settled. Science is never settled. Okay? And I can show beyond a reasonable doubt, that global warming is not happening the way they say it's happening, and that there are many scientists that agree with me that it is not a life or death situation that we have to act on immediately, and that it is not necessarily anthropogenic. Okay? So you have scientists that are reasonable, reserved, and actually embrace science, and then you have the scientific consensus. Okay? Now, the scientific consensus is just people agreeing. It doesn't mean that the data agrees. It means that the people agree. And this is the problem we have. Now, mental health and the state have become so intermeshed in the United States, especially since the World War II era. We've institutionalized all of society, and it's increased ever since. We've mixed the institutions with the school systems. We've mixed the institutions with the prisons. We've mixed the institutions with the police departments. We've mixed the institutions with every aspect of society. And what this does is this allows for a false kind of like a false positive on mental illness, if you will. Apparently now, what it does is it allows, if you disagree with what the state says, you're mentally ill. And this is how it was in the USSR, and it was how it was in Nazi Germany. Now, what's funny is I'm a third positionist. I'm sympathetic to both fascist Italy, and I'm sympathetic to the USSR. However, there are certain aspects of these countries that are not good to have in the United States. For example, in the USSR, people could be diagnosed with being anti-revolutionary or counter-revolutionary and disappeared. In National Socialist Germany, people could be disappeared or even put into concentration camps and labor camps for being incurably communist. Okay? And in the United States, it's getting closer and closer to where you might be put into a re-education camp if you're a Trump supporter. Okay, if you supported Trump or voted for Trump, you might be put into a re-education camp. The Democrats have talked about that. You might be put into a re-education camp if you're homophobic, or institutionalized if you're homophobic. What is homophobic, too? That's another poorly defined term, like white supremacist. They don't really know what it means. They're just saying something to label people as something that they're probably not. Disagreeing with somebody on moral or religious grounds does not make one homophobic. Then you have, who knows where it will stop? Will people that believe in God be institutionalized? As, you know, what's his face? Richard Dawkins, the book The God Delusion. Richard Dawkins is highly influential to these crazy kooks. So how many people will go around, you know, being institutionalized for belief in God? While you have people like AOC comparing herself to Jesus Christ on Twitter, if you know what I mean. And you have people like me showing her that Jesus Christ was a narcissist. According to a very influential professional on narcissism. So my point is that we have a slippery slope, and that no, there's no such thing as fiscal conservatism. Fiscal conservatism is a made-up term by Reagan Republicans to make them sound conservative when they're just all-around anti-American liberal filth. And what do I mean by that? These are the kind of people that say, well, I'm socially liberal but fiscal conservative. No, you're socially liberal and fiscally you're economically liberal. You are against America. You are against the nuclear family. You are against heterosexuality. You are against everything that is normal and healthy. And you are against economic fairness. You're against fair trade. You are against this country. You are against a Buy American policy. You are against anything to help this country, the workers of this country, the people of this country, the families of this country, and you are against the structure, the moral structure of this society, which was set up in the beginning of this country, prior to it even being a country, by the Puritans and the Quakers that were the beginning of this country. They were the beginning of the moral framework of the United States, the Anglo-Saxon Protestant moral framework of the United States. So if you are socially liberal and fiscally conservative, you are actually socially liberal and economically liberal and are just liberal. You are against the idea of a nation state. You are against the idea of borders. You are against the idea of any type of healthy expression of nationalism. Or healthy expression of patriotism, however you want to say it. Patriotism, you can't be patriotic and not be a nationalist. I'm sorry to say that. And you can't be a nationalist and not be patriotic. So all these people that want to say, I'm patriotic, but I'm anti-national. No, you're either a nationalist or you are not a nationalist. And that's the bottom line there. Anyway, that's all for this video. Please check the links in the description. You might find them strangely enlightening.